Hello and welcome to the first episode of the 1:72 scale Spitfire build. Today we are going to focus on the cockpit, so let's build this first. Eduard's 1:72 scale Spitfire is one of the better kits on the market. And in this ProfiPack version it comes with quite some additional details. While plastic details fit nicely together and the engineering is mostly good, some of those photo etch parts give very little return on investment. Especially in 1:72 scale, where very little will be visible when the cockpit gets inside the fuselage. Anyhow, we modelers always want more details, don't we? But in all honesty, I think that a weekend edition of this kit in this scale is enough on details. And with that in mind, do you think that it is possible to build a weekend edition in a weekend? Let's say with a 16-hour time budget? And get some presentable results? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and tell me if you'd like to see me making a video on such build. We can call it the Weekend Edition Challenge. Let's get back to the build. While extremely small, the compass on the dashboard is a 4-fold photo etch piece, which will be in a different color than its credo. So after super gluing it to a sprue, I applied a drop of masking fluid on the instrument face for easier painting. With the gun sight in position, the instrument panel bulkhead is ready for paint. The instrument panel itself is photo etched, so no painting is required. That's why it will be glued in place later. After all sub-assemblies are done, it is time to start the painting process. As usual, this means applying a primer. I am sure that most of you are aware of the purpose of this step, but for those of you new to the hobby, let's recap. The primer ensures the adhesion of the paints to follow. Also, we unify the colors of the different materials used during the assembly, and in the case of this black primer, it helps with the shadows. Before we continue, let me present you the sponsor of today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for you to choose from and develop new skills, hone your existing arsenal, or just explore for something new to capture your imagination. On the platform you can find everything from photography and web development to business analytics and productivity classes. My personal favorite so far is the fundamentals of DSLR photography by Justin Bridges. The way that he explains how to balance the exposure triangle is super easy to understand, and I'm sure this class will help me to improve the quality of my scale modeling photography. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning that there are no ads and they are always launching new premium classes. The first 1000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can explore your creativity. Now let's get back to the build. The first color layer I apply in between the ribs so I can get a little bit of shadows from the black primer. On the surfaces where such approach is not suitable, I just apply the paint in somewhat ununiform style. Approximately 90% of the area I cover now will not be visible when the cockpit is assembled. But in the way I approach things, I cannot tell how much will be visible at this stage. Another option would be to assemble as much of the cockpit as possible and then apply the paint. But this will make the detail painting very difficult. So you can see there is no solution that can satisfy all the requirements. The portion of the cockpit behind the seat bulkhead is supposedly in bare metal, so I masked the neighboring grey-green areas to protect them from the overspray and applied a silver color. This worked as intended and the demarcation line was crisp and fine. Masking here definitely paid off. After the base colors were applied, I went ahead with the initial weathering. This comes in the form of white filter applied in the centers of the panels. This white filter is essentially a heavily diluted white paint. In this particular case, I haven't chosen the right thinner, which led to some spidering. But it is okay at this point because the running paint will not change anything and the wash will cover it up easily. Next is the detail painting of the black panels inside the cockpit. While a masking and airbrushing approach will be beneficial, I opted for the brush as it is much faster and the results are acceptable. Since the scale is so small, I applied artificial highlights on the edges of the raised panels, using a lighter version of the base color. This will make things a bit more interesting to look at, and in combination with the wash, it will boost the volume perception. Using the same highlights paint, I applied some superficial chipping. For the base of the pilot seat, I mixed up a reddish brown color and applied it using a paintbrush. As usual, a few light layers ensure smooth finish and good color. To highlight the edges of the seat and simulate some wear and tear, I added a little bit of sandy color and applied it very strategically on places that I assume are prone to wear. The backrest received a base coat of black paint. Then, using a dark grey color, I applied some highlights. Not that this will be visible after I put the seat belts on, but I did not think about that at this moment. The same highlight treatment I carried over to the various black panels and controls on the cockpit sidewalls. Here, a simple dry brushing would have worked just as good as brush painting, if not better. But this comes to show that oftentimes there is more than one way to accomplish a task. After this portion of the painting was finished, I started applying panel line washes. On the green surfaces I used a dark green color. The panel line wash will serve a dual purpose here. On one side I want to get additional definition on the details. For that, the panel line wash will have to create artificial shadows around those details. And it is very easy to see how those details become more prominent right after the panel line wash is applied. And in conjunction with the highlights I've done earlier, we get a really nice and much needed contrast. For the bare metal surfaces I used a deep grey wash. Again with a pin wash application rather than slapping it on with a wide brush. Looking at the finished model, I can tell that none of this is necessary, as no bare metal part of the cockpit is visible. So if you are building this kit, don't waste your time with this. The other purpose of the panel line wash comes in its weathering capabilities. When I removed the excess, I used downward motion to create faint streaking and dirt accumulation. This is a very easy way to make the cockpit look as it has seen some action. Otherwise, the removal process is quite simple. Q-tips can also be used here, but they have a few disadvantages compared with those micro brushes. For one, they leave fibers behind which can get annoying. And two, the standard size Q-tip is too big for such small surface. The drawback of the micro brush is that it can remove too much of the wash. Another option for excess wash removal is to use a fine brush and a small amount of mineral spirits, or some other appropriate solvent. This gives the most control over the process, but also takes most time. The various knobs, levers and switches I prefer to paint after the weathering is complete, as they are rather small and need a bit more contrast than the rest of the details, in my opinion. The instrument panel in this kit is a 3-piece photo etch assembly. To glue those pieces together, I used PVA glue as it gives plenty of time for adjustment. After I was happy with the result, I left it to cure for a while. These photo etch instrument panels remain probably the easiest and most cost-effective way to get some really good details in such a small scale. I decided to do some highlights on the instrument panel, and while it is visible here on the camera, there is absolutely no way to notice this effect in the finished model. So this is another example of wasted time and effort. The final step before assembly is an overall flat coat. I like the way things look right now, but sadly most of it will be lost. I am trying to devise a technique that will allow me to better judge the potential for detailing my next builds, but for sure revisiting this build really opened my eyes for the problem. I would love to know what you think about it. Join me again next week when we are going to assemble the cockpit and the entire model. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Happy modeling, fellas!